I've always loved Cartoon Network. When I was growing up, it was my favorite channel to watch. Even today, it has some good shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show. One of the newest shows on the network, The Amazing World of Gumball, is a cute and mildly entertaining show. Not really my cup of tea, it's a little immature for my taste, but my little brother seems to like it a lot. One night, I was watching Adult Swim when I realized I'd been up so late that I haven't even kept track of the time. It was already 4 a.m. I don't recall ever watching Adult Swim this late, so I stayed awake to see what would happen when it ended. A little bumper showed up at the bottom of the screen during a commercial break. It said that a special episode of The Amazing World of Gumball was about to come on. I was a little confused about an episode of a very popular new show coming on this early, but I was bored and decided I would watch it, thinking it might come on later in the day so I could spoil it for my brother. Sorta mean, I know. The flashy and energetic intro theme played, although it was played a little differently than I recall. The music was a little different, and the show's logo wasn't animated. Its colors were done rather sloppy, as well, almost like something a little kid would do in MS Paint. I ignored it, assuming that it was done just for this special episode. The title of the episode was called The Grieving. A sort of sad title, but I didn't really pay too much attention. It began with Gumball, the show's 12-year-old protagonist, standing alone facing in the corner of his dimly lit classroom. He looked absolutely miserable, a far cry from the cheerful demeanor he usually had. There was no one else in the room, not even his best friend and adopted brother, Darwin the goldfish, and the windows in the room clearly show the night sky outside. I was really starting to get confused. Why would he be at school at night, and why was he standing in the corner all sad and alone? About what seemed like a minute of Gumball standing somberly in the corner, the scene suddenly changed. We were in Gumball's house. Once again, the scene is silent and a little disquieting. Richard, Gumball's enormous rabbit father, walks in from the kitchen. He looked even more miserable than Gumball in the previous scene. Richard wasn't wearing his usual attire. He's dressed in a fancy black suit, a little uncharacteristic of him, as he's usually a slob. He sighs and slumps onto the sofa and starts sobbing intensely, sounding like someone who had just lost something important. I was getting a little creeped out. Where was the silly, fun cartoon that I usually look forward to watching with my younger brother? This was something completely different. I was beginning to think that this might have been something that the creators did as an experiment or something, a test of the animation or sound perhaps? Though, it couldn't have been, aside from the opening theme, which was still different from the final show's theme. The episode had been much quieter than it usually was. Only subtle sounds and very little music, and the animation was not anything to write home about either. It was done a bit like an amateur flash on Newgrounds. The character designs were somewhat sloppy, rushed looking, and the real-life backgrounds used for the show looked different. As confused and somewhat frightened as I was for some reason, I kept watching it. Poor Richard was still sombering on the sofa, as the front door opened suddenly, making me jump a bit at such a loud noise, and Gumball's mother, a blue cat like him, stepped in. Like Richard, she wasn't wearing her usual outfit. For some reason, she was in a black dress and wearing a pretty black hat to match. Nicole sat down on the couch to comfort her husband, although she was looking a bit saddened herself. By this point, Richard's crying had begun to get more pained and more miserable sounding. This wasn't the normal cartoon crying on the show. This was realistic and almost depressing crying. I almost felt like sobbing myself. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the sad scene at their home ended as it shifted back to the school. We weren't in Gumball's classroom this time. We were in Principal Brown's office. Nicole and Richard were there in their usual clothes, looking normal and happier than they had before, but slightly worried. Principal Brown, however, looked extremely sad. He quietly and somberly informed them that their children, Anais and Darwin, were not present after lunch earlier that day. They hadn't been seen at all the rest of the day. Nicole was instantly furious at him. She began spouting various insults and calls at him that I don't think it would have made it on a more mature program like regular show. I was laughing at this because it seemed sort of funny for Nicole to flip out in this manner and start swearing like a sailor in a G-rated cartoon. But my outlook soon changed when Principal Brown told her something after she had finally quieted down. His eyes began to tear up as he informed them that they were eventually found, but they had not been found alive. He went into graphic and nearly nauseating detail describing how their bodies were found. The parents were sitting back in utter shock. I could hardly believe what was happening. How could such a cheery and fun kids show be taking such a dark and twisted turn? I was considered turning the television off, but I was too scared to be left in the dark by now, nearly frozen by fear and disturbed intensely at the terrible things that he was saying. Another flashback. The scene was earlier that day, and the animation in the scene was even worse than earlier. I don't remember it very clearly, but I think it began his recollection by saying that the school had called the police department when they first turned up missing, believing that the kids had simply ran off and decided to skip school. They said it was very uncharacteristic of both Darwin and Anais to go skipping school like delinquents. Darwin was a little naive and a bit ditzy, but he was a good kid and wouldn't have ever dreamt of doing something like that. And Anais was less likely to run away. She was a straight-A student despite being 4. Which also troubled the police, seeing as a defenseless 4-year-old little girl was missing as well as an older boy. The school had been thoroughly checked, so the police started searching the heavily wooded area outside the school. It took a little time for the police to discover the horrifying fate of Anais. In a small clearing outside the school, Anais's head was found in a small box. You would likely expect something like this to be shown in the show's cutesy art style, but it wasn't nothing like that at all. Realistic blood covered the box inside and out, while Anais's head was done in a normal style, but was drenched in blood and some other fluids. Not all of them are hers, apparently. There was a note inside, seemingly written in her blood. It was never stated during the episode what exactly was written on the note, but apparently led to the rest of her remains and Darwin's heavily mutilated corpse. I remember most of this scene was how out of place it seemed. All the blood and gore from Darwin and Anais's slaughtered, disremembered remains was done in a realistic and disturbing fashion. It looked like the scene had been taken from a crime scene photograph done by a professional, not something from a cartoon. The way the scene was animated was different from most of the show as well. You may know that the characters from this series are done in vastly different animation styles, from flash animation to CGI. And I think there's even a character done by someone putting their chin upside down to make a face. This particular scene wasn't like anything I had seen on the show before. Every little detail on Darwin's face was clearly illustrated. He looked a little like a zombie, but his face was very pale, and his eyes had been gouged out by someone. Anais fared no better, or what was left of her anyways. She was naked and her stomach had been slit open. Her intestines were strewn around the trees and the bushes in the woods, done once again in a very morbid and realistic fashion. I was feeling very ill by this time. This incredibly disturbing flashback had come to an end, so I quickly ran to the bathroom to vomit. I was feeling better after upchucking, so I realized that I had good timing and had ran to the bathroom during a commercial break. It was then I noticed that the show had been running twice as long. It usually ran for 11 minutes, but this episode was running for about 30 minutes. By the time I was wondering if there was any information on the Grieving on the internet or something. So, while the commercials were still playing, I looked up some information about this episode on Google. Nothing came up. No information remotely similar to the plot or name of this episode existed anywhere. Now incredibly scared and wondering if there was anyone else watching, I quickly dialed my brother Larry and asked him to turn on to Cartoon Network to see if he was seeing the same that I was. He was pretty mad that I woke him up at this hour, but he's a nice guy and told me that he would see it for me. I thanked him and I stayed on the line as the show came back on from the commercial break. The scene had thankfully panned away from the horrific sight of the children mutilated and was back to Principal Brown's office. I asked Larry if he saw some cartoon animals talking and crying, since that was what they were doing on my TV. To my surprise, he said he saw nothing like that at all. Instead, it was a rerun of an old Looney Tunes short. In utter shock, I dropped the phone, ran over to the TV, and turned it off. As hard as I pressed the buttons on it, it would not even shut off at all. I tried every single button and none of them did a damn thing. I tried unplugging the whole set as well, but nothing worked. The TV stayed on no matter what. Larry had hung up, assuming that I was playing a joke or something. I guess I was alone once again, and my door was locked from the outside somehow, and the door to my bathroom was now locked as well. It seemed I had no choice but to call the police, since my family members were gone that night. It was the only reason I could stay up to watch Adult Swim in the first place. When I hurried and dialed the number, I accidentally dropped my cell phone into my cup of Pepsi. I was very scared and I had no choice but to finish the episode. I turned on all the lights and got under my covers, hiding like my little brother does when I make him watch scary movies with me. I had apparently missed a little bit, but Gumball's parents were still talking to Principal Brown. Not so much. Nicole was asking if Gumball was alright, apparently, since she hadn't remembered him when Principal Brown told her what happened to Darwin and Anais. He looked slightly confused and shocked for a moment. Explained to her that thought Gumball was out sick today and that he spent the day at home by himself with a stomach bug. Nicole screamed and wailed while Richard quietly told him in a very out-of-character voice that they thought Gumball had gotten on the bus this morning, but it didn't seem that way. The police were called in once again to search the building in the small forest outside of Elmore Junior High. They had found him in Miss Simeon's classroom, hanging by a noose, with a blood-covered knife behind him and blood covering his clothing. The episode ended with the shot of Gumball's dead body hanging there in the corner, fading to black. The credits rolled silently, not like the usual way Cartoon Network annoyingly airs its promos that squishes half the screen. These credits rolled unusually slow, and then they weren't fun to watch either. A little creepy, just plain white text scrolling in the black background. I only recognized Ben Beauclerc's name as he was the creator of the show. The rest of the people I never heard of. The copyright notice at the end said Cartoon Network Studios 2001, which was incredibly odd seeing as the show was new for 2011. After that was all over, the screen went to static for a split second, during which some incredibly creepy and shocking video clips were shown in static intervals. I can still remember them all very clearly. The first was a picture of a person in a plague doctor outfit. Those always scared me for some reason. And that the person in the suit was filmed just as bad, a red light, something that freaks me out incredibly, was shown over the clip. The next seemed like a video clip being played very quickly over and over of a kitten's face being squished by a woman wearing high heels, which was strange because a so-called friend of mine showed me a picture yesterday of a cat being stepped on and killed, similar to the kitten in the video. The last one was the one that disturbed me the most and made me want to cry and vomit my guts out. It was my little brother, or at least a small child who looked very similar to him, being shot in the face by a person who looked like my father. You could clearly see the child's brains and blood splattered all on the wall. I began to sob uncontrollably after the traumatizing clip, so much that I passed out. When I woke up, my door was unlocked, my television was turned off. I went to call the police on the home phone in my kitchen and report that I had seen some very disturbing things on television and that my doors had been locked. When they arrived, they could find nothing like that I remembered from earlier this morning. My internet history was even cleared. They were angry at me and just assumed that I had a bad nightmare. When I sure I hadn't, thankfully one of the officers felt bad and took me out to a small diner to recollect my thoughts. At the diner, I remembered that my family was out visiting my aunt and they were supposed to be back by noon or so. It was already 11, so the officer and I drove back to only find a whole squad of police cars and even some government agents at my house. They explained to me that my little brother was missing and that my mother and father were suspects. I was freaking out and trying to tell them about the disturbing clip of the boy who looked like my brother being shot in the head, but they didn't listen. I stayed with my older brother Larry, who wouldn't believe me either, still insisting that he saw was an old Looney Tunes short and nothing at all creepy or weird. The cops eventually told me that they would contact Turner Broadcasting and tell them about the incident. A representative from Turner Broadcasting came to my cousin's house to talk to me in private about what I had seen and experienced that night. He was very kind, but it all seemed a little like some sort of front. After I could tell him all that I remembered, he agreed to play back the clip that day's programming from when the incident with the disturbing Gumball episode had occurred. To my shock, all that was airing at the time was an old Looney Tunes short, nothing more, nothing less. I hysterically sobbed and moaned that what I had experienced and seen was completely real, but no one listened. Eventually, I discovered that Ben Beauclerc had a Twitter account, so I sent a message about the episode, and this is the reply that I got. One thing. How the hell did you find that? I never ever thought I would think about that old shame again. Don't tell anyone about this, Sarah. Yes, that's my name. But the amazing world of Gumball goes back further than you know. I used to have a really boring job as a teen, and I sketched out little comics of the Watersons and friends. The episode you saw was never supposed to be seen by anyone but me and a few friends of mine. It was a very, very awful thing to do, but we made the episode as a joke. A guy from my old job who everyone hated had lost his child to a crazed serial killer, who was apparently still out there somewhere. Anyway, we made it so we could make fun of him, of how he came into work usually crying like a fool, which is why you saw Mr. and Mrs. Watterson crying so much in the episode. I know, I'm deeply sorry for what I did, which is why I tried to bury this stupid thing years ago. Literally, I went out to the countryside with me and my mates, dug a hole and buried it. What I didn't get, though, is how you described the blood and guts and stuff. We didn't have any scene with Darwin and Anais's bodies being found. All that happens in the episode is the parents are informed of their kids being found dead, and then crying like crazy. We didn't draw anything like that in the episode like that at all. We're not that sick. Now here's my theory. The lunatic who killed a man's child found the tape we buried, watched it, and heavily edited it. Then he hijacked a local TV station near your hometown and somehow got it to air on your local Cartoon Network station. Now, why your cousin couldn't see it, I have no idea. Why it seems you're the only one who saw it, I have no idea either. Sorry, but I just don't know. Now for the explanation you have been waiting for, the clips at the end. I don't know. I'm deeply sorry from the bottom of my heart. I don't know why those clips were aired. I just don't. I'm sorry, I really am. But me and my mates are just the ones who made the scenes with Richard and Nicole crying, that's it. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so deeply sorry. Best wishes, Ben Bocalet and everyone involved with the Grieving. Now this was probably the longest creepypasta that I have ever done on this channel. And I have a feeling it might not even be my last, but personally this was actually one of my favorite creepypastas, even though there is a lot of cliches with with like the violence against animals, minors, and all that stuff. But it has a little bit of a personal touch because I actually kind of used to watch that show a little bit back when it first aired, but I haven't been watching it much at all. Not anymore. I mean, not at all recently. Maybe just from here and there, because I had like other things to do and stuff like that. But anyways, this was feel free to comment, rate, and favorite this video. Subscribe to my channel. Look me up on Facebook and other social media that I might have. And anyways, this is Marshall Dion saying, see you later.